Welcome to our last session, session 6, responding to changing care needs. We have two facilitators here tonight, as we've been speaking over the weeks that we get a new face every week, and this week we have two new faces. And I will let them introduce themselves when the time comes. For any of you who may have missed some of the sessions over the last 6 weeks, I just wanted to let you know, some of you probably already know, but that they are on the Asante Cafe website. So if you just scroll down under the live meeting, so if you just scroll down, you'll see them all marked there. It all says session 1, even though it may be session 2, 3, 4, 5, or now 6. But all you gotta do is open that up and you'll be able to watch some of the sessions that you may have missed. So those are going to be up there for another couple of weeks while we figure out exactly how to best use them. Yeah, so feel free to watch any that you might have missed. I know some of you have been in touch with and told you that already. As we have said multiple times, this is a pilot, and many of you have been giving us feedback along the way, so thank you very much for that. At the end of today's session, there are going to be 4 very short questions that we're going to put up on the screen. And we just ask if you could please just answer those right here and now or then and there. And those are particularly related to the technical aspects of this session. So the fact that it's online, and we just wanted some feedback about that, whether it worked or not. And then tomorrow, Heather's going to send you out 2 other questionnaires or 2 other feedback sheets. One is called a participant feedback form, which is a little bit more detail about the content of the session. At the end of that form, there's a question that we are only asking those of you online, and that is, if you have any ideas of how we could possibly use these videos now that they've been made and we have access to them, and we can share them. So if you have any ideas about how to share them or with whom to share them, or we're looking for ideas. We have a bunch of our own and feel like you might have some more too. So there's a question on the participant feedback form related to that. So if you take the time to fill that out, that would be wonderful. One of the other forms, the second of the 2 forms we're going to send you is a future contact form, which is just our way of asking you how you'd like us to keep in touch, if you'd like us to keep in touch. So again, the form will be very self-explanatory. If you could just have a look at it, you should be able to fill it out right online on your computer. I've sent it out in a format that should work, and then save it and then send it right back to us. And if you have any problems with that, do not hesitate to ask Heather or email Heather, and she can help you out with that. So that feedback, those evaluation pieces will come out tomorrow morning. Or maybe tomorrow afternoon. Again, we have the chat line here for questions or thoughts or ideas as they may come to you for people online. And again, for our friends here in the boardroom, feel free to get Tatiana to slip questions under the door, and I'll field them to Cynthia and Linda, our speakers tonight. All right, well, without further ado, you can tell the sun's shining here in Halifax because it's across my face and you can watch it move across. And I will move out of the hot seat and pass it on to Linda.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Asante Cafe and welcome to our 6th session on the Family Caregiver Series. So tonight's title is called Responding to Changing Care Needs. We know this is a journey with Alzheimer's disease, and it can take many years. So over the years, as people's abilities change, you're going to need to contact many different resources along the way to help you with your journey. So my name is Linda Bird. I'm the Director of Programs and Services here at the Alzheimer's Society, and I'm very delighted tonight to be co-facilitating with Cynthia Stillwell, who is the OT, PT, and Care Coordinator Manager in the Central Zone with the Nova Scotia Health Authority, and she'll introduce herself when we switch seats. So this is a partnership with the Alzheimer's Society and with Asante Cafe. who is our sister organization in Alberta, and we are very thankful for their support in the delivery of this. So when we do these online sessions, we've talked about the guiding principles, support of one another, respect for one another, listening, being open for positive action after you've heard the messages tonight, and confidentiality. So the objectives of tonight's session specifically is to look at the changing care needs of the person with dementia, look at their changing abilities, their specific needs, and look at how that affects you as the primary caregiver and what considerations you have to consider in keeping yourself healthy and helping to support the person you're caring for. So we're going to explore resources, both public and private resources, to support the changing needs of people with Alzheimer's disease or another dementia. So hopefully by the end of tonight's session, you'll be able to identify some criteria to help you make decisions about your own situation, be aware of supports in the community, be familiar with government-based resources, including financial resources, and be familiar with the process of getting someone into long-term care across Nova Scotia. So tonight, I want you to think before we get started, think about what changes have you noticed in the person that you're caring for? What's changed that now they require more support from you? And how has those changes impact your daily life? For example, when you think of your day-to-day, what kinds of things are you doing? Are you taking over banking? Are you doing more meal preparation? Are you having to arrange the social calendar? Are you spending a lot of time queuing? Those are just some of the things about. So just before we even start, just think about how has your life changed with the progression of this disease? So this disease is progressive, and Brenda talked in week 1 about the changing symptoms and how that affects a person. So it's a good time just to review that and think about how do those changes affect what you do on a daily basis. So we talked about communication and language difficulties. So the person with dementia may have difficulty understanding what's being said to them, but also to be able to express their own emotional needs and physical needs, be able to talk in response. So how does that affect you? How do you make up for those changes in communication to better support that person? The person with dementia might be experiencing changes such as anxiety, restlessness, sleep disturbances, and why that affects their mood and their behavior and their ability to cope. It also, if it disrupts your sleep, it affects you and your ability to cope and have patience. And to, if you're up part of the night trying to calm someone down or reassure them that everything's fine, how does that affect your ability to cope the next day? The person with dementia might experience some decrease in memory, and we know that that happens and gets progressively worse over time. So how are you helping to support that person? Are you cueing them? Are you helping them write things down in booklets, post-it notes? Are you having to phone them to remind them about appointments? How are you supporting them with their memory loss to keep them independent and safe? How does that impact your daily life? We also know that people with dementia can have changes in personality. They can go from being happy to sad very quickly. How does that affect your interactions on a daily basis? If someone's personality or their mood swings are happening, how does it affect your ability to respond? How does it affect your emotional well-being? How is that impacting your life? Sometimes people can become less inhibited. So the person with dementia might be For instance, hugging everyone they meet, and not everyone's comfortable with that. How do you feel when that happens? Are you having to explain to people on the street or friends what's happening? How does that impact your daily life? People with dementia can feel paranoid or have delusional symptoms. And sometimes we'll hear that the person with dementia will think that their spouse is cheating on them. And so how do you reassure them? How do you deal with them when they bring this up? How do you relieve their fears? How much time does that take? How does it impact your daily life? As the disease increases, people have a need for increased physical care. So they might need help getting to the washroom, they might need help getting into cars. Even earlier than that, they may no longer be driving, and so you're doing the driving. They may have incontinence, both bladder incontinence and urine incontinence. How are you with dealing with those things? They may have changes in their orientation. So they may not know what day or week it is. They may go outside and not recognize the house that they live in, the street that they're on. They may be at risk of wandering and getting lost. How does that impact you on a daily basis? What things are you putting in place to make them safe and comfortable and to relieve your stress and your anxiety? And eventually, as this disease progresses, the person with dementia will need full-time supervision. You may be in the early stages and you can leave someone alone, and they're fine and safe to be alone. But eventually, with the progression of the disease, they will need full-time supervision. So that means either staying with the person or arranging for someone else to come in and stay. So all these things that we're talking about tonight, all these symptoms are general symptoms, and everyone with the disease is unique. Not everyone will experience all these things, but they may experience some of these things, and it will impact their day-to-day lives. Some of these symptoms will be there for one period of the illness, and as they progress, may disappear, and another symptom may appear. Some of these symptoms may be more prominent when the person is tired or stressed or hungry. So you may see patterns in symptoms occurring at some part of the day and not the other. Late in the day, often people will be taxed from a full day of activity and may have more difficulty in some of these symptoms and may require more help. So maybe the evenings are particularly stressful time for you in order to support that person. So what does this mean to you? So as the person changes, as a partner in care, your roles and responsibilities increase over time with the progression of the disease. This can affect your quality of life, your stress level, and it's really important to seek help in a timely way, to seek help before things turn into a crisis. And the good news is that there is help available. So think about your own situation. Think about how the symptoms of the person is impacting their day-to-day and in turn impacting your day-to-day, and think about, how is this affecting my time, my workload, my patience, my disposition, my ability to get other things done. So when you're thinking about caregiving considerations and when is the right time, we don't know when the right time. You as a family member or a friend can figure out when the right time to get extra help is. But here's some things to help you to guide when it's a good time to start getting help. So one of the first things is a safety concern. So safety could be things like wandering, driving, the person driving, could be leaving the stove on, it could be being at risk for fraud calls on the telephone. So is the safety of a person at risk? And are there things that you need to do to help reduce the safety aspect? So if someone is living alone and cooking meals, think about, is there something that could help with meal preparation, that the person isn't at risk to cause a fire or situation? If person is at risk of becoming disorientated, we talked in earlier sessions about safely home, about GPS tracking devices, about getting a companion to go for a walk. What could be put in place to help to reduce the risk of safety risk, but also to give peace of mind for both you and comfort level for the person with dementia? Space is also an issue when we're looking at caregiving considerations. You look at the space that you're living with. Is it big enough to put in a wheelchair or grab bars or walking devices, things that could help keep the person safe and in their own home? If stairs are an issue, is there something you can do to help with the stairs, like putting someone on the main level? Or is it an opportunity to say, maybe we should move to a different alternative housing option to make the person more safe and help to maintain their independence? Is care becoming more complex? Are you having to assist more in things like bathing and toileting? And how comfortable are you doing those things? Maybe caring for a partner, doing some of that intimate care you're comfortable with, but if you're a son and daughter, maybe that intimate care you're not as comfortable with. So explore that aspect of caregiving. Think about your own health, both your physical and emotional health. We hear about situations where 85-year-olds are providing physical care at home for another 85-year-old who needs help getting up and off the bed, into the shower. Is safety a concern? Is physical safety a concern of both the caregiver and the person with dementia? How is this caregiver journey affecting your emotional state? Are you in a good place to be providing care? Or are you so stressed and so overwhelmed that you're gone into depression or have mental health issues that are aggravated, that you could use some help to help relieve some of these things that can be contributing to your own health care needs? Are you able to balance the responsibilities of providing care with other responsibilities in your life? We all have lives with our partners, with our spouses, with our moms and dads and relatives, maybe adult children. How are you, grandchildren? How are you able to balance the multiple demands in your life? You may be doing volunteer work, still working at a full-time job. The more responsibilities you take on, are you able to continue all these things without extra help? If you're working, are you able to meet the demands of the job? Is caregiving impacting your ability to provide financial support for your family? Think about the finances. Are there ways that you can use some of your finances to provide some of the support in order to provide a better quality of life for both yourself and the person that you're caring for? So think about what resources are available. And the whole point of tonight's session is to think about all these different resources, think about the needs in your own life, what would make the most sense, and hopefully know about different things that you can access when the time is right. Sorry about that, I skipped a slide. So just in summary, things to think about in the next bit of the program is, when do you need to get help? So first off, are there any safety concerns? Is the risk of the person with dementia at risk, or is your own health at risk by not getting help? Does a person with dementia need more help than he or she is receiving now. Sometimes we hear from families and they say, you know, I promised to keep them home for as long as possible. But when you talk to that person, they're really burnt out. They're, they're short-tempered. They don't have a lot of patience. And you wonder if they had a little help, a little break away, would they be able to regroup and look after their own care needs so that they could be a better caregiver? You don't have to do it all alone. And sometimes by doing it all alone, you put your own health at risk and you are actually providing um, less than adequate care for the person with dementia. So don't be a superhero. Think about what else can help you. Think about, is your caregiving role become more difficult? And just stop for a minute before we proceed and think, is there some aspect of my life right now that if I got some help with this one aspect, it would help relieve some of the stress that I'm feeling right now on my journey. So I'm going to give you a minute just to think about that. So I hope you have something in mind, and I hope we have a solution. So what help is available? So I'm going to talk a little bit about community programs and other services in the community. We're going to talk a little bit about home care, respite care, and alternative housing solutions. So programs in the community. Often we hear of things that, especially in the early stages of the disease, that somebody says, you know, with this disease, a lot of our friends and family are falling away, they're not visiting, and the person I'm caring for is bored, we only have so much to talk about, you know, I don't know what to do. Just having someone come in and spend some time, one-on-one time with the person with dementia can be a huge gift. You can participate in the conversation, you can excuse yourself and do something else in the house, but having someone come in and spend some time and they don't just see your face or exposed to someone else can be a real gift to yourself and to the person with dementia. In many areas of the province, VON offers a friendly visiting program that comes in and does that. They have facilitator visitors that come in who have a background, who've had some facilitation and orientation to dementia, and they can come in and provide some one-on-one visitation with a person with dementia. It also could be a family member or a friend. You know, people are always asking, what can I do? Well, you know what you could do? You could come and speak to Dad for, you know, come in on Tuesday at 2 o'clock and speak to Dad, or come over on Saturday and go through the picture book, or take Dad out for a drive, or take your friend Joe golfing. There's all kinds of things that people can do. There are faith communities that can come and do some visiting programs. Or offer special services and things for the person with dementia, especially if they're having trouble getting out of the house. We hear from families that transportation can be an issue to get out. So organizations such as VON, or sometimes the Legion, or some of the community groups have organized vans that can assist in transporting someone for medical appointments or social engagements or to church. So look up on 211 or in one of my favorite resources, the Positive Aging booklet that you can get by calling Department of Health and Wellness, that lists all these resources in the booklet. Another area of community program can be meals. Sometimes if we're overwhelmed or have too much on our plate, for someone to come and bring a meal so that we don't have to add that to our plate, especially on a day when we've had maybe multiple appointments, to have someone bring in a meal that you have a nice meal to look forward to and not have the stress of having to prepare that, that's excellent. There are organizations such as Meals on Wheels that can deliver food, and that's especially good for people living alone. In your grocery store, there are frozen favorites or frozen dinners that you can buy and pop into the microwave or the oven when you've had one of those days when, you know, that's the last thing you want to do is have to prepare a meal. There are specialized equipment programs such as Red Cross that can loan things such as, or rent such things as walkers, wheelchairs, scooters. Sometimes these are, you rent them for a temporary period when someone is convalescing from an illness, or sometimes just during a period of a time when someone is progressing through the disease and they could benefit from and help prevent falls by using a walker or a wheelchair. There are programs such as adult day programs, which are activity-based programs geared to the person with dementia, and it's an opportunity for them to engage in meaningful activities where they can be successful with, to be in a room with people who understand the disease, with people who are on a similar journey such as themselves, to get together and do things. And it also has the added benefit of providing the caregiver some respite and some time away from providing the direct care, free from the responsibility for a short period, either half a day or a day, could be 1, 2, 3 days a week, 5 days a week, that gives that caregiver a break. So when they are back together, they feel refreshed and able to manage the rest of the day activities. There are specialized services available through seniors' mental health. If there's problems with behavior or medications or whatever, your doctor can visit your doctor. Your doctor can also make a referral to seniors' mental health, or your care coordinator can also make that direct referral to seniors' mental health for specialized services. And there's also the Legal Information Society if you need help with wills and advanced care directives that we went over in session 2. There's other services in the community that can help, such as grocery delivery. Many of the superstore or grocery chains can deliver groceries. You can arrange for them to deliver your groceries. I don't know if you know, but when you're ordering your medications or prescriptions through the pharmacy, you can also add other things into that. And as you know, the drugstores carry toilet paper, hygiene products. Some stores carry things like milk and eggs and bread, so you can have that added into your delivery. Faith communities, as we talked about, can come and do visitation or spiritual practices, depending on your faith community. Service clubs can help with snow removal, leaf, lawn cleanup, transportation. Friends and neighbors can help with meal preparation, taking someone out for a drive, visiting. There are community agencies and businesses that can actually come to the home. We know there are dental hygienists that make home visits, hairdressers, some of the other services in the community. When you tell them that you have a difficulty getting out, some of them can make arrangements to come to your home, and then you don't have to travel out. There are other things such as someone to help with budgeting, and these are usually paid for services. Decluttering, helping to make a move from one home to another alternative housing option. Income tax preparation, foot massage, hair care, crisis intervention, and the list goes on and on. So think about your situation. Think about what would help the most right now to give you some relief and take some of the pressure off. Who can help and what can they help with? So at this point, I'd like to introduce Cynthia to come aboard.
Yeah, I think I will keep that binder, Linda, actually. Good evening. Thank you, Linda. And as Linda mentioned, my name is Cynthia Stillwell, and I am currently in a role as manager with continuing care for community occupational therapy, physiotherapy, and care coordination here in the Central Zone with the Nova Scotia Health Authority. This is a relatively new role for me, so the majority of my career has actually been spent in working as a direct service provider with clients and their families, many of whom have had dementia, Alzheimer's disease, or other related cognitive impairments. And my background actually is as an occupational therapist, but the last 2.5 to 3 years have been working as a care coordinator. So that's a little bit of what I bring with me today, and I'll do my best to both represent continuing care and what services are available within the province of Nova Scotia at the current time, but also maybe to shed a few examples or thoughts of having worked with clients and their families for some period of time now in the community. And I think it's really nice that we have this partnership with the Alzheimer's Society to be able to work together as partners on this initiative. So I guess the often thought of as the base of our program with continuing care is with our home care service. And the home care service is a service that's delivered in people's homes. And there, I guess, through continuing care, that's a publicly funded service. But there are other private home care agencies and home care options that are available to persons living in the community as well. The bulk of my experience and professional experience has been within our public health care system. And here in Nova Scotia, if you need to access continuing care, and that ranges from anything from requiring one of our publicly assisted hospital beds to home oxygen, to home care, through to long-term care. There is a central intake number that you can call to access that service. They do answer live calls. However, on occasion, there's frequently you receive a message or a voicemail, sorry, and you can leave your details, and one of our intake workers will call you back to get the details of the reason for your referral. And so our phone number is 1-800-225-7225, and that's across the province. So, and I always say to people, if you are a client of continuing care and you've forgotten who your main contact is at continuing care, by simply calling that number and leaving a message, someone can call you back and let you know who your care coordinator is, or put you in touch with the right person. So it's a handy number to have in an accessible place. So as I said, there are many other private care options for home support and home care. And as Linda mentioned, there are a number of them listed in this booklet here, the Positive Aging booklet. But you can also call 211, and a lot of them are listed there, or in your yellow pages, doing internet searches, lots of different options there to find out about the private options as well. All right, so in terms of continuing care, the bulk of our home care services focus on the categories that are listed here with the 5 different bullet points here. I'd like to actually skip to the bottom of the slide to begin this part of the presentation, just to say that in continuing care, we embrace a home first philosophy. And that home first philosophy is one that the Nova Scotia Health Authority as well is embracing. And the whole idea is that Nova Scotians have told us that they would prefer to receive their care at home as long as they possibly can, and would prefer to remain in their home environment. And so that's our mission with continuing care, is to try to help support people, Nova Scotians and their caregivers, at home as long as possible. So typically the very first thing that you would be asked by a care coordinator or even an intake worker through continuing care is to ask you what your needs are, what your unmet needs are. And so if it's determined through your assessment process that you are in need of home care services, there's a number of categories of services that we provide. We do have nursing care available through continuing care. And that is provided provincially at this time through our service providers through VON and or through Nova Scotia Health Authority continuing care nursing in some areas of the province. So that care is provided in home. The frequency of visits for nursing care varies according to the needs of clients. And services that might be included through nursing care are things like wound care management, medication monitoring, or if a family member wants to be able to assist their loved one with their medications but is having difficulty, for example, getting used to the new schedule or the new blister packs for the medication or what have you. Sometimes we will put a short period of nursing in place to help teach the caregiver how to, provide medications in a reliable manner. We also have services through home care nursing for post-op care, catheter care. In a few circumstances, we have some clients who require NG tube feeds. So they're sort of task specific. We also have a very extensive amount of care provided with respect to palliative care and end-of-life care through our nursing service. So again, that is determined, the frequency of visits or the need for nursing care is determined based on the assessment that's done when you first contact our program. Second category of home support. So this would be care that's actually provided through continuing care assistant, or I guess formerly known as a home support worker. There's a lot of different terms used. So differing from the nursing care, which is provided by a licensed nurse, our home support care is provided by continuing care assistants. And they can assist as deemed necessary with personal care, bathing, dressing, assisting with a tub bath. And in certain circumstances, we will offer meal preparation, or in some cases with clients with dementia, actually, especially if they're living alone, it's not so much about the meal preparation. It may just be that the person needs a visit around a particular meal time just to ensure that they're actually eating. So depending on the need, again, that service is available. And in some cases, we do assist with light housekeeping. Now, these last two categories, meal preparation and light housekeeping, if there is another able-bodied individual in the home that can do these tasks, then we do ask that that person complete those tasks unless there's an issue of very significant caregiver burden going on. So really, your service needs are determined through your assessment process. And the last category is for respite. And I have another slide coming up here that will talk a little bit more about what our respite services offer. Actually, before I get on to the respite services, I should mention that when you are referred to continuing care and your referral is processed through our intake department, the very first thing that will happen is you will be assigned a care coordinator. And the care coordinator will come to your home unless you're receiving referral while you're in hospital, at which point we do have care coordinators who visit people in hospital. And the care coordinator will meet with you and your loved one, or as deemed appropriate, to determine, as I said, those unmet needs. So there's sort of two portions of the assessment, and one is with respect to your unmet care needs. And the second is a bit of a financial assessment. Home support services within our province are provided to all qualifying Nova Scotians. You may have a copay for your home support services, but that's done based, we determine that based on a sliding scale. And in order to determine whether or not you would have a copay, we do require a copy of your notice of assessment, which is kept confidential on your file or on your loved one's file. And by providing us with that, you will allow us right away to be able to determine whether or not there is a copay for your service. The program is sponsored by the Department or provided through the funding from the Department of Health and Wellness. So undoubtedly, it is subsidized, but you may pay a portion of your care depending on your income, not on your assets. So it's a income-based financial assessment. Okay, so to move on to this next slide around respite care, we have I'd like to think of three different kinds of respite care. The first one here that on our slide is in-home respite. An in-home respite would involve a continuing care assistant or home support worker coming to your home to provide relief to a caregiver, and in this case, a caregiver of a person with dementia. In order to qualify for in-home respite services, your loved one must require 24-hour supervision on a daily basis. So what this means is that you're simply not able to leave the person at home for periods of time due to your concerns around their safety, their ability to mobilize, or the questionable unsafe behaviors within the home if left unsupervised. So with our in-home respite service, again, that is determined based on your assessment with your care coordinator. And we do ask, typically with your in-home respite, that it's a regularly scheduled time that you would plan to either go out. We have some people who will just sleep during the respite time because maybe they've had some late nights or nights where they've had to been up multiple times. In some cases, although it's not as common, depending on availability, there have been some occurrences of some overnight respite as well. So again, this is very much a person-centered assessment that's completed to determine what it is that your loved one and you as a family are requiring and what the unmet need is. Respite is also provided through some actual facilities. So what we have is in each area of the province, our health authority is divided into 4 zones. There are a number of, we call them facility-based respite beds. And what those are, they're beds that are located in licensed nursing homes or long-term care facilities. And through your care coordinator, you can, if you meet criteria, book time for your loved one to go into the respite facility to provide a much-needed break for you as the caregiver. And so the respite facilities, while the person's there, they essentially are functioning just like another person in the long-term care residence, except of course that they've brought their own clothes, their own wheelchair, their own medications, and so on. And there's an admission process that is done to ensure that things are set up properly. And certainly I've found that clients who are very intentional, or families who are very intentional about using this service really do quite well. I recommend accessing it earlier rather than later. It can sometimes be a difficult transition if it's the first time someone's going after they've had a fairly significant development in their disease. So earlier is better. And the last one here is adult day programs, and these are not provided solely through continuing care. The Nova Scotia Health Authority has partnered with some service providers to provide day programs, but there are others that are real grassroots programs throughout the province that have been very, very successful and helpful for clients. And honestly, as a care coordinator, I will say the adult day program is honestly one of the hardest sells for people, and partially because, especially with dementia, a lot of times people will end up being afraid of new things, or they won't want to leave their primary caregiver. We often call it shadowing, where they're kind of following the primary caregiver around. Oftentimes people are afraid to try it because maybe their loved one is exhibiting some behaviors that are kind of not necessarily socially appropriate all the time, but appropriate adult day programs are designed with a recognition that that is the case with clients with dementia. So I can't stress enough how much I would encourage you to try these programs. I've had numerous clients tell me that it was the most life-giving thing that they had done for both their loved one and for themselves. I've had some people have to go back up to three times with the loved one, giving it yet another try, and have had good success with that. So I do recommend trying those day programs that are available throughout the province. Again, before I move on to speak about this next slide, I do want to mention that continuing care services, home care services, are provided by a number of different home service providers across the province, depending on where you live. Here in the Central Zone, I believe we have, I think it's 7 different service providers within the district, or within the zone, but there are certainly other service providers in different areas of the province. So I don't want to mention one in particular as to not show any kind of preference, but just to say that in terms of the actual on-site delivery of home care, we partner with other companies who actually deliver the care, but the care coordinator oversees that service and works with you to make changes to the care plan according to the changing needs of your loved one. One slide that, thanks for reminding me of that. One slide that didn't actually make it into the slide deck today is just with regard to a couple of other programs that we have available through continuing care. And they are programs that actually pay a direct benefit to the client or to their primary caregiver. One is called the Caregiver Benefit Program, and the other is the Supportive Care Program. And the Department of Health and Wellness, Nova Scotia Health Authority Continuing Care website has fact sheets on all of these programs available online. And certainly here at the Alzheimer's Society, I'm sure they could point you in that right direction. And I'm happy to provide links if anyone is looking for those. You can certainly reach out to the society here. But both the Caregiver Benefit and the Supportive Care Program, again, the assessment is completed by a care coordinator. They provide a monthly funding. There are specific eligibility criteria for those programs as set out by the Department of Health and Wellness. The Caregiver Benefit Program is designed for clients who are low income Nova Scotians who have a very high level of care. So these would be people who would likely otherwise be in long-term care. And the eligibility for that program is determined through your assessment with your care coordinator. The Supportive Care Program is an excellent program for clients with dementia. It's a little bit different than home care. What it does is it provides a monthly benefit if you meet the criteria of $500, which is payable to the client themselves, not to the caregiver, but to the client. And then the person's substitute decision maker or power of attorney can use those monies to hire people to come in and to provide services that home care would otherwise provide to their loved one. The nice thing about this with clients with dementia is that we know that for various reasons, clients with dementia tend to work better with some people than others. And what this program allows is for you to be able to hire someone for up to $500 worth per month to provide care in the home to your loved one in the same way that a home care provider would, except that essentially you are making the arrangements for that provision of care. And a lot of folks have found this helpful because sometimes there's someone in the community, a student or a neighbor or someone from the church community that just seems to have that just right relationship with your loved one. And through this program, you can actually pay that person, as long as they're not a family member, you can pay that person to be able to come and provide that care for your loved one at the time that you wish on your schedule, and to discuss with them what your expectations would be in the provision of that care. So again, care coordinator, assessment with the care coordinator is how we determine the need and the eligibility for all of these programs. And most of this assessment, especially for those last two programs, is done in the community, though oftentimes people are first accessing their home care service, like on discharge from hospital, but that will often happen. All right, just checking on the time here. We're doing okay. All right, so to move along to alternative housing options. Sorry, I'm just looking for a little note I had here. So as your loved one's condition changes, you may find that as you look ahead, you see yourself in need of maybe a smaller place to live or one that's closer to family. Some people will move in with loved ones in in-law suites. Some will share accommodations. I've had situations where sisters or brothers are sharing an apartment. The one thing, again, in my experience in working with clients and their loved ones is if you see that you will likely need to make a move in the future, I recommend making the move earlier rather than later if it's simply to downsize or move to a smaller place. Transitions become very difficult for some as the condition of Alzheimer's disease or these dementias progresses. So I do recommend giving some serious consideration to that. And if you're thinking that you will make a move, to do that earlier in the process rather than waiting, because it can become very, very overwhelming. Just a little plug here on downsizing. If you are looking for a new apartment or you're setting up a new home, you're moving to a different place where you will be living with your loved one with dementia, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Association has some, or corporation, sorry, has some wonderful resources online. If you go under their website, under programs for consumers, there's a whole section on aging in place, and they actually have a 3-volume series on housing options for people living with dementia, and they have some really specific examples of things set up that they recommend. And I had a quick view of them myself, and a lot of them are really great suggestions. So that's a resource that's available for free online, maybe in print. I'm not sure how you go about ordering that, but that's another option. If you're considering moving to a new place as well, or if you're wondering about the suitability of your home in terms of aging in place or in providing care for your loved one, you may wish to access the services of an occupational therapist or of a physiotherapist, someone who can come into your home, and there are, again, public and private options available for that. In addition to those, clinics that you see in your community, that there are some community physiotherapy options and occupational therapy options. Here in the central zone, our occupational therapy and physiotherapy teams in the community are tied with continuing care, but in other parts of the province, that structure looks a little bit different. Nonetheless, there are services across the province that are available through the public healthcare system. And oftentimes these professionals can be really helpful in doing assessments to determine how you can best help your loved one and set up your environment to provide care. I feel like I've been talking for a fair bit. I'm wondering if there are any questions. Would it be appropriate to stop and ask for questions at this point in time?
It looks like a couple have just come in.
Sure. All right, can you please repeat where the online information was available? Oh, okay. It's the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. I believe it's a corporation. So I don't represent them specifically. CMHC. So honestly, I just went on and I Googled CMHC, uppercase. And by going to there, if you go under the consumer option, under programs, and then there's another subtitle that says aging in place. And then under there, there's something, housing options if you're living with dementia. So that's where I found that. Are there any other questions? Anyone need to stand up and have a stretch before we move on for the home stretch? I'm gonna have a drink myself. Thank you.
And again, feel free to ask questions anytime, and I can field them to Cynthia.
One thing I will say, just again, submit your questions if you have any around home care services. And I always tell my clients this, or I did as a care coordinator, is no two people are alike, no two families are alike, no two caregivers are alike. They might have similarities, but what's really important is a person-centered assessment. And especially if I'm working with people who live in condominiums or apartment buildings where there are others receiving care, oftentimes I'll hear, well, so-and-so is getting that, or so-and-so has this. And I always say, if you're not sure about what you would qualify for, make contact with your care coordinator and ask the question. The assessment that's done is done based on need, and it's done based on, we have eligibility criteria. If you're wondering about the policies for home care, long-term care, they are all posted on the Department of Health and Wellness website. There's no secret. It's a very transparent process. So if you have any questions in that regard, specific to your situation, do contact your care coordinator. All right, I don't see any other questions at this point. And the fourth bullet down there, there's a mention of assisted living. And certainly when we're talking about changing our living or housing arrangements and moving into a place where there might be more support, there are a number and many new private options coming up just about everywhere with our population aging and a greater demand for these types of living options. There are more and more assisted living options coming up, and many of the companies that are offering these living options will have varying steps through their program. So you might enter live in one building, and then if you wish, you can move up to the next level of care and the next level of care. So there are definitely private options for assisted living. They're often designed to meet the needs of seniors. They are not licensed. We do not have licensed assisted living facilities per se in the province of Nova Scotia. These are all private options. And I often will see clients with sort of more in the early stages of dementia moving into assisted living facilities. I've had some clients who will move in later stages, especially if they have a spouse who just can't do it all themselves and they have the financial resources to move to a more supported living environment. The one thing I would encourage anyone to do, if you're, regardless of what housing option you're considering or assisted living option that you're considering, do ask questions about what services are provided. Through this caregiver education series, you've learned about the progression of this disease, and we know that a person with dementia will require more care over time. So it's very important to ask what services are provided with your monthly rent, whether or not there are additional charges for additional services. What happens if your mobility changes? Will you still be able to live in the building? Will you still be able to get to the dining room? These are questions to ask when you're considering moving into assisted living. And certainly we have some folks who will move into an assisted living residence just sort of as a short term while they await a longer term option. Residents in assisted living facilities do qualify for home care provided they meet the basic home care requirements through continuing care, but we will not duplicate services. So for example, we will not come in to do evening meal preparation if your meal is provided in the dining room. if you are entitled to a half hour of personal care through your rent, then we will not duplicate that service. So, but it is important to know that if you are in an assisted living facility and you require more than the assisted living facility provides, you can apply for home support services, and an assessment would be completed based on your need. All right, we'll take a big breath before we move into the long-term care discussion. This tends to be a topic for which there are many questions that arise, and this has been a hot topic in the media of late. And again, I can't stress enough, if you have questions specific to long-term care, how it relates to your loved one, to long-term care in our province, I do encourage you to contact a care coordinator, to contact continuing care and ask those questions, and not to just rely on what you're hearing with respect to options. Here in the province, there are two categories of homes or care that are provided through licensed care facilities. And when I say licensed, that means they're licensed according to standards set out by the Department of Health and Wellness, and they are accessed through continuing care. So Department of Health and Wellness provides the funding, continuing care provides we maintain the wait list and provide access to the continuing care homes. There are two sort of large categories, I guess, of homes. One is a residential care facility. And in residential care, this is a sort of an entry level of care. A person must require some nursing service. These tend to be people who are really dependent for a lot of their, what we call, instrumental activities of daily living. So people living in residential care facilities often have trouble with managing medications. They can't, or might have difficulty preparing their meals. They tend to be dependent a lot of the time on other people to help them with their finances. Most of them don't drive. And they require a certain degree of personal care. So it might be that they really need someone making sure that they're attending to their personal care, or maybe they need assistance, maybe about a half an hour a day. It's a lower kind of intensity of care provided, but there is 24-hour available supervision, and meals are provided, and access to these this option, residential care, is provided through the continuing care program. The next level of care, which I think most of us tend to think of when we think of long-term care, are nursing home level care facilities. And these facilities have nursing care available on a 24-hour basis. And people, over the course of my career, I've certainly noticed that people who are living in long-term care facilities now require a significantly higher level of care than persons who lived in these facilities, say, 5, 10, 15 years ago. So quite a high level of care. There are other services typically provided in nursing homes as well. Some have physiotherapy, occupational therapy, recreation therapy programming, social work. Many have a very rich group of volunteers who are instrumental in providing in promoting a very positive living environment for people. So that's the nursing home level of care. And again, there's lots of information on the continuing care website. Sorry, just having trouble moving the slide ahead here. Does no one do that? We'll try it this way. Okay. All right. Yep. So on the slide, there we are. Sorry for the pause there. In order to access a long-term care facility through continuing care, a person does have to have a valid Nova Scotia health card. Their eligibility is determined through the Nova Scotia Health Authority Continuing Care Coordinator, and they have to meet requirements for long-term care. In order to, sorry, I see the question just came through, I'll come back to it there. In order to be admitted to a long-term care facility, a person does have to be medically stable, and they do have to require ongoing supervision on a 24-hour basis. And the person needs to be willing and needing to go to long-term care. In some cases, a client or a person has been determined to lack the capacity to make decisions with regard to long-term care. And in this case, we work with a substitute decision maker who's identified early in the care coordination process to determine who would act in that person's place if they were unable to make that determination for themselves. I'm just going to pause here for a moment and read this question. Been told that a person living in a residential care facility has to be able to evacuate themselves. Tricky for a person with dementia. Is this true? Yes. So the idea behind this, and I certainly recommend asking specific facilities if you are visiting them. But yes, a person who's living in residential care must be able to, we call it self-evacuate. So they need to be able to, if the fire alarm rings, be able to move with the group to where they need to go to get out of the building. Some residential care facilities do require that you be able to negotiate stairs. Not all, some of them do. This is why, again, it's very important to work with the care coordinator to determine, is this the right fit? Sometimes we'll have clients who are quite, they're still doing a lot for themselves. They require more supervision, and maybe their memory or their ability to orient themselves is such that they couldn't do this, and for that reason we might actually classify them as a nursing home level 1, but it's still a nursing home classification. There are some places that distinguish between 1 and 2, not all facilities, so I didn't really focus in on that too much. Hopefully I've answered that question. Again, if you have questions about the long-term care placement process, you can access this information by calling, again, the 1-800 number that's listed there on the slide. Although I should say that as a care coordinator, we should rarely be receiving a referral for the first time in continuing care because someone's needing to go to long-term care. It does happen. There are certain circumstances where it is appropriate, but by and large, our focus, we want to work with you in the community first, and long-term care as an option that's we only proceed with after all of our community-based options have been eliminated or worked through. All right. So in terms of the long-term care facility, if you're waiting in the community, when a person is approved for long-term care, for their name to go on the wait list for long-term care, you will work with your care coordinator to go through a process for assessment. And in doing that, if you're waiting in the community for a long-term care bed, you are given the option to make some choices, to identify some preferred facilities where you would like your loved one or where you would like to live. And so you are encouraged to, next couple of slides will actually talk about things you might want to look for when you're thinking about those options. Again, there's a lot of misinformation in the public with respect to this particular element. I've had a number of clients very afraid that if they even talk about long-term care, that we're going to send them to the opposite end of the province. And I will tell you that there are some very, very good people working behind the scenes within our continuing care structure to do everything we can to provide real person-centered care to you and your loved ones. And if there is any way that we can make this work within the system that we have, that is what we're there to do. So if you do require long-term care and your care coordinator working with you, has determined that long-term care is indeed the next step in this process, your care coordinator will submit a request to have your loved one's name added to the long-term care wait list. And we have a process at a management level for reviewing all those requests. And at such time that that review has been completed, your loved one, if they're approved for the long-term care wait list, will obtain what's called a care level decision. And that's essentially determining that, yes, their care requirements are such that they require long-term care. And their name will be added to the wait list. In March 2015, the first of a two-part series of changes was implemented to long-term care policy within the province. It used to be that you could go on the long-term care wait list and then decline a bed or defer when you were offered a bed. At this time, we are only putting clients on the long-term care wait list who either themselves or their substitute decision maker are prepared to accept a bed when that bed is offered. And you will only get offered a bed for the facilities that you indicated as a preference, unless you're in a situation where you have to take the first available one. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So that was a policy change back in 2015. I believe it was, we were having, I think it was 22% of the people that we were offering beds to were actually declining or deferring their bed. That is very, very rare since this change in policy has been put in place, and the wait lists have come down significantly. So most people now on our wait list are people that need to be there, want to be there, and are ready and willing and prepared to accept a bed when offered. Some of you may have heard of what's called the first available bed provision. And what this means is, in certain circumstances, particularly if you're in a hospital within Nova Scotia and it's been deemed that you absolutely, no matter what we do to try to help support you and your care providers are offering, if it's determined that you just can't go home and you need to go to long-term care, there is a provision in the province that says we do require, we being the province, requires that you accept the first appropriate long-term care bed within a certain kilometer radius. But that only happens if you are in a hospital and requiring immediate transfer to long-term care after you've become medically stable. Okay. I know there are a number of questions around the wait list for long-term care as well. And the one thing I will say is that when you start the process for long-term care, it may be such that you know it's going to happen. Say, you know, you're going to need it in the coming months and coming years, but you know that you can you have a bit of time to work with. But if things change and you need to access a bed sooner, then you work with your care coordinator to open up more options of places that you'd be willing to have your loved one go. It's a very fluid process. It's all related to the changing needs of your loved one, which is why it's so good that we're talking about this within the context of changing needs. So your care coordinator can work through that with you. In terms of paying for long-term care, so there's sort of two portions of the long-term care assessment. One is around the care, and the second part is around the finances. And there are a lot of questions around this. Again, there are fact sheets on the continuing care website. The policy around long-term care and the charge is available on the Department of Health and Wellness website. But when you are assessed or your loved one is assessed for long-term care, a financial assessment is completed. Again, this is done based on your income, not your assets. It's based on your income. If you're a married person, then it's yourself and your loved one. And if you're a single person, of course, it would just be a single person's income. And we require, again, a copy of your notice of assessment for that assessment to take place. And I understand that there is a handout available to those of you that are in our boardroom tonight entitled Paying for Long-Term Care. And so there's some more detailed information around that. And I think I'm allowed to touch base with you when we leave the room here. So if I can be of any help or answer questions on that, I'm happy to do that. Just leave a minute here to see if there are any questions around paying for long-term care or the long-term care process. This is the handout that we're referring to. If I got it there, entering long-term care.
And it should be available online.
It is available online as well.
And on the Assant Cafe website connected to this session.
Right. We'll let that information percolate a little bit. And there's got to be a question. I know one's brewing, so we'll answer it as it comes up. This is just one slide here. I don't represent Veterans Affairs Canada, though I've worked in partnership with them with a number of my clients. If you are a veteran, if you think you might be a veteran or your loved one might have served, it is worthwhile contacting Veterans Affairs Canada to determine whether or not your loved one would qualify for any benefits through Veterans Affairs. The VIP program or the Veterans Independence Program is one program that does offer some assistance with grounds maintenance, housekeeping, personal care, and nutrition. And sometimes the primary caregiver may be eligible for some respite as well. I will not speak to the eligibility for that program, except to say if your loved one has a K number, like a service number, it is definitely worthwhile contacting Veterans Affairs. Veterans Affairs does also have some, well, there's two things. They provide funding for long-term care in some cases, depending on the service of the veteran. In other times, a veteran will qualify for admission to one of the actual veterans facilities beds. And here in Halifax, there are beds at the Veterans Memorial Building, which is attached to the QE2 complex on Veterans Memorial Lane. And the admissions and whether or not one would qualify for admission to those beds is determined through Veterans Affairs Canada. And the phone number is there if you have any questions. One thing with respect to veterans, if you've not sent in a power of attorney or something that tells you that, or tells them that you are the correct person for them to speak with, they will absolutely ask to speak to the veteran themselves. So if your loved one is progressing with their dementia and you foresee that you may need to access this system, it is definitely worthwhile finding out what it takes to become a delegate on their file, because this can be difficult. It's not on this slide, but just to say as well, if you do have private insurance, this is another option. You know, you have to really look at what your options are. There are some private insurance companies that will provide coverage for private nursing services, for private occupational therapy, physiotherapy, nutrition. Sometimes they will provide for some home care services or rental of hospital beds, which is also we have a hospital bed program through continuing care as well. But it's always, I always recommend when times get tough, we need to find out who our people are and really look around and look at what our resources are, both informal and formal, public and private. If you are considering long-term care, again, there's a handout entitled that the Alzheimer's Society puts out called Long-Term Care, Preparing for a Move. And it has some helpful information in it about things you would want to consider when you are identifying preferences for your long-term care facility. Again, most of the nursing homes in Nova Scotia are licensed nursing homes, though there are a few private. that are not licensed through the Department of Health and Wellness. But each of the nursing homes is given the ability to operate within their budget, within the stipulations of through the Department of Health and Wellness in their own way. Different homes have different philosophies of care. Care can be delivered in different ways because of the setup of the home, because of the age of the building, because of whether or not there are private rooms versus shared rooms, shared accommodations. And there are truly pros and cons to all of these options. And so this is when it really comes down to knowing what your loved one needs and working with the rest of your family, service providers, healthcare professionals, your physicians, to find out what is it that your loved one really needs. There are going to be some facilities that tend to be seem like there's a little more community feel. Some are older but have a lot of things going on in common areas, and it's very kind of busy place. Some have units that are specifically designated for dementia care. Others have what we call a blended model of care. Some units are secure units where the person cannot leave the unit without an attendant. Others have secure access to the building. And again, through continuing care, when your loved one is put on the wait list for long-term care, that's something that the care coordinator helps to determine what kind of long-term care bed would meet your loved one's needs. So these are a few of the questions you may want to ask yourself as you're thinking about placing your loved one or having your loved one move to long-term care. Things like, are the staff trained in dementia care? The people that are working there seem happy? How do they handle responsive behaviors or behaviors that might seem to be challenging or sudden, how do they handle that 5 or 6 o'clock time that we often call sundowning, where persons with dementia tend to struggle a little more in terms of behavior? Are they shared bathrooms? Are they single bathrooms? Likewise, are there shared rooms or single rooms in the facility? I would say the majority of people entering long-term care through the continuing care system enter in a shared accommodation capacity. In some cases, depending on the client's, the person's needs, they may enter into a private room. And some of the newer facilities only have private rooms. So by virtue of the fact that you're admitted there, you automatically go into a private room. Again, there are pros and cons to every arrangement, and it's all about what your loved one's needs are. To that end, if your loved one does enter a facility through long-term care, through continuing care, and it's not their preferred facility, they can remain on a wait list to be transferred to the facility of their preference. I assure you, this does happen. We estimate that approximately 25% of our nursing home admissions are actually going to be transfers from another facility to the facility of preference. I've had this happen within my own family, so I've also gone through this on a personal level, and have had a loved one transferred from one facility to another, both of which had their own opportunities and challenges as facilities, both of which delivered very good care. Just one in particular seemed to meet our needs more than the other as a family and with respect to my loved one's needs. So another question I always ask is, will you be able to visit easily? Are there specific visiting hours? Can you drop in at any time? I often recommend, if you're going to visit a loved one with dementia or maybe someone whose ability to communicate is diminished, I often recommend visiting during the time where something's going on in the home, some kind of recreational program or what have you, so that when you go in, there's really something to do or something to focus on. Are there meaningful activities for residents? How do they incorporate the residents' interests, likes, dislikes, What are the policies around family visiting? What are their policies around the use of restraints? What do they do if someone is becoming agitated? What are their policies around medications, around contacting family, and so on? And a lot of people really want to know what furniture and personal items they can bring. And I can assure you, almost without fail, every facility is going to encourage, some personal items be brought in to make a person feel more comfortable. What you can bring in terms of how large the items are really does tend to vary by the facility because of the varied setups of the rooms and the age of the building. Okay, and a couple more here, and I'm getting my 5-minute warning. So just in summary, when making your decisions around care, focus on those facts and look at all of your possible options. Try to stay realistic and know what you can handle and when we're reaching your tipping point. I often say we can't, unfortunately, change the ultimate trajectory of this disease. What we can change is how we react to it and what we do about it. And as caregivers, you have decisions that you can make with respect to your own care to some degree as you provide support to your loved one. And so it's very, very important to do that. Do involve other family members, friends, members of faith communities, support people. If there's one message I would want to leave with you today is just that. The people who have cared for loved ones with dementia well, in my experience, are the people who have reached out broadly. Those who have tried to do it all on their own, in my experience, almost without fail, have struggled the most. And this is particularly true for women providing care for their husbands, in my experience. There seems to be a sense of obligation, a sense of wanting to provide and care for without always recognizing their own personal needs. So I'd caution you and ask you to really look inwardly on that one. As much as possible, involve the person with dementia. Find out what their needs are and what their desires are before it's too late. What's important to them. If they want to go visit facilities in advance, do that. Oftentimes when we end up actually facilitating the long-term care placement, it's a bit too late to be doing a lot of those visits. So, a lot of these facilities are really embraced with communities. We have churches doing church services in them, guides and scout groups going to do recreation programs and volunteers and so on. So embrace those facilities within your communities and get to know them. And this is the last one. When you need help at home, there's the 1-800 number. I don't want to repeat it again because it'll sound a bit like a commercial on the television, but it is right there, and the website is very helpful. You will be assigned a care coordinator. There may be a wait time for your care coordinator to come out to see you. We do our best to prioritize our referrals based on the needs of the time. If something has changed from the time that you call to initiate your care, do call and let us know. It may be we need to get it to see you sooner, or it may be you just need to touch base with someone and know that we're coming. Care coordinators do not have ESP. They don't automatically know when something has happened. So if you are working with one, please keep them informed of any major changes with your loved one. Your financial assessment is income-based. And we do require a copy of your notice of assessment for that financial assessment to take place. The care coordinator oversees and works with you to develop a care plan, and will work with service providers to get your care in place and change it as your loved one's needs change. And as those needs do change, do contact your care coordinator for follow-up. Okay. We're switching again.
Wrap up with some resources for us.
So thank you, Cynthia. That was a lot of excellent information. And the key takeaway from that is you don't need to do this alone. Think about what services you need, and it's never too early to start thinking about it and having that plan in place. So you can never be too prepared for the journey. Being informed is essential to make the right choices that fit with your family. Accepting help is key. And often I'll ask when I'm doing this live is, how many people here have ever helped someone else? And we all raise our hand and we all say that makes us really, really good. But it's harder for us to accept help from others. But it's essential to keep your own health and well-being intact and to provide the best possible support for the person living with dementia. And make the most of each day. Every day, life is going to change. We never know what's around the corner. Take advantage of each day and the supports that are available. So just a little bit about some help and information that's available. Don't forget family and friends and neighbors as a source of help and who may want to help you with visitation, drives, meal preparation. The Alzheimer's Society is here to help. We have our Alzheimer info line, 1-800-611-6345. And that's a confidential one-on-one contact with a support person who can provide you with guidance along the way, help direct you to resources that you need, remind you of services in the community that can be helpful when you get to certain points along the journey. Just like tonight, offering this education and support group for families, we also offer other workshops and education sessions. So check our website, get connected through InfoLine, and be aware of other opportunities to provide ongoing education. We are part of a federation of societies across the country, and we have over 50 fact sheets and brochures on different information, focusing on different information needs, from worrying about memory to transitioning to long-term care and everything in between. So check out our website or talk to staff at that 1-800 number, find out what you need and get informed. Having the knowledge helps you make choices that best fit with your individual family. So that's really important. We do public presentations, and I'm going to put a plug in. Our conference is in October 23rd and 24th, and a part of that we have a family night that's open to the public. So you're all welcome to attend. Check out our website, the www.alzheimer.ca/ns. Visit your public library. There are lots of books and videos, and make sure you use continuing care and contact them through www.nshealth.ca/continuing-care. And they can provide lots of support along the journey. So again, for further information, call our office here in Halifax. We can help connect you and make referrals to other organizations and agencies that can help. And these are just some of the sources that we used for the research that we presented tonight, the facts and information. So the Nova Scotia Health Authority Continuing Care site, the Department of Health and Wellness Continuing Care, Positive Aging, and Veterans Affairs. And those are all in your handout that you received on your slides. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kirsty.
Lots of shifting of the chairs this evening. Thank you very much, Cynthia and Linda. Linda might be a person that you might occasionally run into an info line too, just because we've introduced, the other facilitators had introduced themselves to put faces to info line staff. So I'm just adding that in. The information that Cynthia presented tonight connected to continuing care, as she said, was Nova Scotia focused. I know there's at least one participant who's been dialing in from New Brunswick, and some of you may be caring for people in other provinces. So just to be aware of that, and in all likelihood, there are similar programs across Canada, but some of the details might be different. So just to be aware of that. Encourage you again to watch any of the missing videos online. We have a brief poll that I talked to you about initially. And then those 2 feedback forms that I'm going to send out tomorrow morning for the online people to fill out. For the people in the boardroom, you can't, I don't think you can actually do the poll. You certainly can't as individuals, but in your handouts are the 2 forms that I'm going to email out to the online people tomorrow. So if you look at the back of your handouts, there's a participant feedback form and a participant contact form for people in the boardroom. So if you could have a look at those. And for the people online, I'm bringing up those 4 questions. And if all goes as well, you should be able to answer them right there, and that the results don't come to me, they go straight to Christine in Alberta, and she'll tabulate them and send them on to me tomorrow. So if you could just take a minute to answer, or you would you participate in the 4 questions there that you should be able to access. And again, to fill out the forms when they come tomorrow, and I'll send you a little wrap-up email as well. If you wanted to go into the room, I'm going to send Linda off into the boardroom just to facilitate the feedback in there. And if there are any questions, actually, Steve, you want to go in the boardroom too if there are any questions there. And I'll just leave this up for a minute for those of you online to respond to.
Those you want us to answer in there.
So assuming that you've had a chance to look down, it looks like I haven't seen anything from Christine that says it's not working. So thank you very much for answering those polling questions. Again, feel free, any kind of feedback to send to me or Christine or Heather, I guess is the person whose email address you have here. Please feel free to introduce yourself if you come into the office, and introduce yourself as someone who participated online, because we won't recognize you. And again, the 1-800 number that we've given out a million times. So thank you for coming, and I'm just going to pull out now, and Christine maybe can leave it on for a couple of minutes for the poll. And other than that, I bid you adieu. Thank you.